Good morning, everyone. Happy Sunday. Happy Super Bowl Sunday, or as not my pun, but Nachum's pun, Happy Super Book Sunday.
There you go.
As Zero Friday. I was blown away with that. This morning, as the second Sunday of the Sfarim sale, we are privileged to have in conversation Nachum Segal and Rabbi Dr. Ari Lam, speaking about Nachum's new book, 1.8 million minutes and counting, over 40 years of radio broadcasting on the Jewish world. And Rabbi Dr. Lam is the co-founder and president of Soul Shop Studios, looking to engage and interact with the Gen Z audience for Jewish digital media content. So without further ado, they have much more interesting things to say than I do, but it is my privilege to introduce them for us this morning.
Thank you, brother. Good morning.
Well, I'm really excited to be here. We have done something like this before, and I'm going to try to make sure there's zero overlap, so no cheating from last notes. But I'm here with a guest where I know there will be zero overlap in the story. So
I hope so. I'm just thinking that I can't tell some of my best stories again.
As the book is called 1.8 million minutes and counting, there is so much material. In our last conversation we covered maybe 1%. And I'm excited to get to 2% in this conversation.
Thank you.
So just over Shabbos, I was at Mincha with a friend of mine who came to me out of nowhere. He didn't know that we were speaking, and he said, "You know, it's the funniest thing. I was just talking to my dad, and I was going through his high school yearbook. You know who's in his high school yearbook? Nachum Segal." And I was like, "Oh, tell me more." I'm speaking to him tomorrow. So he said, "You know his nickname was Stretch?" And I said, "I'm almost positive that was the name of his first show."
Right.
Simcha with Stretch.
Right.
So can you give us a sense of, before the JM and the AM, before the Nachum Segal Network, before the, major phenomenon that we all know and love now, where did this all begin?
Appreciate that. And ironically enough, and that's why this morning is so special for me, it began right here. This entire career and everything I've written about so far and that I continue to enjoy every single day all started from half a block south from here, which is now a parking lot. I'm sure when you were an undergrad, knew it as a parking lot, but we knew it as a building that was a combination of the Dramatic Society and the radio station. And someone asked me on the way up here today, they said, "What did you major in college?" I said, "Well, officially sociology, but honestly, I just lived at the radio station the entire time. So I guess I majored in radio, but there was no official major." And then what happened was, and this story is well documented, but it's a reality. I'm standing half a block from here, excuse me, in a line, trying to apply to get a radio show on the radio. So, and in those days, if you remember, it's not like now. Radio was such an exclusive, not exclusive meaning like an exclusive club, but it was such a unique project, such a unique aspect of campus life here. And radio stations in general on college campuses were so interesting and diverse and unique and active. It's very different today. So I'm standing on a really long line to apply for a show because my mother, as I mentioned in the book, said she thinks I would enjoy this type of thing. And I'm filling it out, the application. Everybody, including myself, wants a rock and roll music show. And some guy says to me, who's standing in line with me, says, "What did you apply for?" I said, "A rock and roll show." And he says, "Oh boy." I said, "Well, what's wrong?" He says, "Well, if you apply for a rock and roll show, you have like a 40% chance of getting a show. If you apply for a Jewish music show, you have a 100% chance to do a show." I took out my pencil immediately, knew nothing about Jewish
Should have
music.
been a finance major. That's arbitrage opportunity right there.
Say that again. So I applied for a Jewish music show, became Simcha with Stretch on Thursday nights. Thursday nights had this unique atmosphere on the YU campus because there weren't many people around, right? They either had gone home or they're out, but those who were around, that small niche, they needed something to do, were a little looser with their schedule and their studies, so they would gravitate toward listening to the radio. It was literally, you could turn on your radio and listen through the campus transmitter. So that's how it all started. I did a couple of years of that. I became a board member and then actually general manager of the WYUR radio station. And then the greatest coincidence, if there's such a thing in life, occurred when WFMU at the time, which had a morning Jewish music show, they were desperately looking for someone to take it over, thinking that it was just going to die out and it wouldn't be there anymore for the community. And somebody, a gentleman's named Norman Laster of blessed memory, decided to call YU, saw on the directory or heard on the directory that there was a position called Director of Student Activities, Dean of Students, the great Larry Waxman. And he calls Larry, who picks up the phone, and Larry was a tremendous mentor of mine. He said, I'll have someone for you in 20 minutes. And sure enough, that's what happened. It all happened right here. All this magic I just described happened right here. That's why this morning, when I am standing at a table that says featured titles, and they take a picture of me with this book, I'm like, wow, this is so mind-blowing. YU Spermsdale, right in the center of where this all began.
So speaking of Larry Waxman, and from one great educational institution to another, oftentimes when people come up to me and they say, I know your father, so I say, is this under the Camp Marashah category or other category? Because it's all in Camp Marashah. So what is the, I think when people think about the rise of Nachum Segal, those who know that YU plays a formative role in it. Sure. But what's the influence that Camp Marashah has on you as a performer, on you as a teacher, on you as a radio personality, and on the entire endeavor that's
right? Well, the Marashah piece was, again, once my mother put the suggestion, because it happened erev of me going to be a staff member at Camp Marashah. She said, when you get to Marashah, you're going to meet a lot of guys from YU. I hear they have a radio station. I think it's something you'd enjoy. I never would have thought of it beforehand. But she was brilliant enough to know her son very well. And I get to Marashah, and I just, I start speaking to people about the campus experience and what it's like, not just the radio station, but everything. And it all sounds so amazing to me and so incredible. In fact, I think Larry was shocked when in September he saw me at YU in 1981. Like, I had been there for the summer, and he knew that I was enjoying being part of the Chevra, but I think he was shocked that I actually had decided to come here as an undergrad. And I think that's what the camp experience was for me. Marashah has its own unique, many things we could discuss about how great it is. But I think that's what it was for me, just that I really gravitated toward the Chevra and got this incredible impression of what was going on this campus.
So, you really come of age as a, radio personality, as talk radio in general nationally is becoming a massive and massively influential phenomenon. The fairness doctrine goes the way of the dodo, as you are, as this era, and it enables this era, so as this era is growing, you actually meet Rush Limbaugh for the first time in New York City in 1988 at Moshe Peking, I believe.
Right.
And
you remember Moshe Peking?
I've heard the stories. So how does the wider culture of what's happening on radio at the time influence the way you think about it?
Well, there's no question that, being at the right place at the right time, being part of the golden era of radio, and I know that some would argue that there was a golden era in the mid-20th century, and there was to an extent, and certainly radio was very influential and powerful. But there was just something about, as you say, the talk radio and all the different formats that were being featured at that time around the country. And the influence was obvious. I mean, Rush and many others, started to have this incredible effect on government officials and on the community leaders and on certainly the world of entertainment, et cetera, et cetera. And then some of them, he, more than anybody, was able to blend all of those together. He was entertaining and could become part of pop culture and comment on pop culture the same way he was able to incorporate politics and government into his show. So I enjoyed that era and its growth. And frankly, unlike today, where the ears are have many options. And listenership is very, very fractured. I mean, that's obvious to everybody. And we play a very different role than we did back then. But in those days, we were really an essential source for people to obtain information they never would have gotten anywhere else. People today still say, especially in my generation, they'll say to their spouse, the spouse will say, "How did you hear about this?" "Well, you don't listen to JM, so how would you know?" In those days, it was really true. Every Mazel Tov wish, every community calendar announcement, every development of news from Israel, every featured guest who had an important book or an important opinion to state that came on the air. That was true. I mean, the most obvious example of this is when Shlomo Carlebach passed away. I would have to imagine, not completely, because not everyone's listening to me directly, but through the ripple effect of JM and the AM. He died on a Thursday night. We announced it early Friday morning. From the ripple effect of JM and the AM, I can't imagine what percentage of the Jewish world knew about it because we had reported his demise. So, that was quite an era.
I want to come back to like some of those key moments in just a bit, but I wanted to move into something more focused on you. So one thing that struck me reading the book is you have these amazing pictures. I mean, the whole and I will say, even as I've kind of grown older and reading has become such a source of joy, I've not lost my enthusiasm for picture books. So this is great even for that reason. But one thing that struck me is for every picture you have with you and a celebrity, or you and a famous Jewish musician, or you and a president or a prime minister, there are 3 pictures with you and your children. And I think when people say a budget, for example, reflects your priorities, like how you spend your money reflects your priorities, or the way you if you're a sports fan, like I know we both are, when you're a GM, who you hire and who you bring on really reflects your priorities. It seemed to me that those pictures really reflected your priorities. And one of the things that a listener, any longtime listener to you will know, is that your family is an indelible part of the personality that you bring to this entire show. And one thing that I didn't realize, and that I learned reading the book, is that actually some of your major personal milestones, both tragic ones and joyful ones, are directly intertwined with the show. And I was particularly struck. I was particularly struck by the episode where you have your father on, and and you lose your father shortly after that that day. So can you talk a little bit about how? First of all, that story is incredibly powerful. Incredibly powerful. I mean, I'm a crier. People know me. I'm a crier, but I was crying reading that chapter. Can you talk about how you have thought about the growth of your family and your connection to family as you've gone through this career?
There are a couple of points. First of all, again, in 2025, not everybody would get this. Radio is such an intimate medium.
Yeah.
And if you're going to speak to people, especially in a niche community like ours, a niche audience like mine, if you're going to speak to people on a daily basis, it would be almost impossible, right? Everyone has a different personality. Almost impossible to not include the audience in your discussions about family, to not include your family in discussions with the audience is always, unless, again, you have the discipline to completely keep it separate. But in my world, of free-form radio, without any executive producers, let's put it that way, I had no reason to do that. If I felt that something should be mentioned, or that a milestone, especially a positive milestone, should be acknowledged, and certainly I'm going to do it. But one of the most brilliant inscriptions that anybody, I have a policy. I don't know if you know, I think I shared this with you once. I have a policy. I don't keep any books. I don't keep anything.
You told me this, yeah.
But if it's a book that's inscribed to me, it is kept. That's the policy. What's going to happen eventually, I don't know. We're going to have to see what happens eventually. But that's my policy. So I have some incredible inscriptions. So we have this, both a running joke and a tradition in our house. As the kids were growing up, I would say in their teenagers, they were getting older. One of the sources of our Dvar Torah on Shabbos would be Sivan Rahav Meir's book. That was it. Okay. And we would always, I would do a big introduction. It became this family joke, etc., etc. So when I met her, I said to her, I just need you to know that this is what happens in my house every Shabbos. Like, you need to know. And she was, of course, flattered, and she thought it was hilarious, and we spoke about it. Anyway, she signs her book to me, and she writes to Nachum, remember, the real show is on Shabbos.
That's amazing. That's great.
And I'm like, if anybody has ever encapsulated what the most important thing in our lives is, with all our accomplishments, you're a very accomplished fellow. Nothing's more important than family. Absolutely nothing. And that's the number one priority. And it's not always easy to juggle it. It's not easy to do it. There are challenges, time-wise and otherwise. But at least to remind everybody that it's the most important thing. I think it's in the book because people were speaking to me about it. I once said on the air, "I love you" to my wife. So we had two reactions to it. One was how terrible that in a public environment you would go ahead and say something like that to your wife. And the other one was from women who called me, some who I knew, and said, thank you for what you just did, because my husband now has no excuse to say that he can't openly tell me that he loves me. So, these types of things are really important to me. The funny thing is, as you bring up about the pictures and stuff, I don't know if every family's like this, and I don't know if every father goes through this, but when you have, thank God, a wonderful collection of sons and a wonderful collection of daughters, so there's always, some conflict, this is a very sexist house, and, the boys overrule the girls, and the girls don't get a chance for this, and that no matter what you do or say or demonstrate, you're never going to win the battle, at least in my opinion. So, what did I do? On the book, I made sure that the only children on the cover of the book would be my two daughters, so that forever they can acknowledge that and make sure to realize that they got prime real estate.
So I actually had that as a question. As a girl dad, I clocked it and appreciated it.
That's funny. That's great.
So one of the things you think about, if you love music, I love music. Music in general. There are landmark moments in music history. There's 1938 Spirituals to Swing concert at Carnegie Hall, right. All black musicians playing in front of. There's Woodstock in '69. There's the Beatles at Shea Stadium in the '70s. For Jewish music, there's Shai Mendelowitz and Ding putting on, bringing Jewish music to Lincoln Center in 1988.
Right.
And you actually locate that as the moment when Jewish music kind of makes that leap into the public consciousness.
Because a lot of things happened that night. First of all,
what was that?
First of all, they actually proved that people are willing to leave Brooklyn and other Jewish areas to come to Manhattan for a show, which was a big leap in 1988. Trust me. So that's number one. Number two, they were willing to pay a minimum of $50 a ticket, which in 1988 is, and believe me, there weren't that many $50 seats available. Trust me. So they were willing to prove people were willing to do that, and also to utilize Jewish music to support a really important cause. Remember that concert, which they thought was going to be a one-off, was there just to save the can. That's what it was there for. The government helped HASC all through the year. They were not ready to give grants for the summer program. The community was made aware of the fact through Shia and Mordechai and David that this camp is going to close if they don't have the funding, and they took a risk that people, if they're given a good night of music, are going to respond, with generous donations, and that's what happened. And a lot of people, from many different communities stepped up, and that was and just the atmosphere, Lincoln Center was. There's something about it, the boxes, the lighting, the acoustics, even the massive doors, just to walk from backstage to the stage, you have to wait for a couple of guys to open these massive doors, which is so elegant, it's so beautiful, so that night was definitely a game changer.
So let's get into it.
Sure.
You have been one of the driving forces behind the rise in popularity of Jewish music, and I kind of think, like when you think of great musicians. So, or when you think of great fixtures of any musical industry, so pop music, you have great musicians, you have the Lennons and McCartneys, right. But then you also have the great band leaders who, some of whom didn't even play an instrument at all. Like Kay Kaiser, is one of the best-selling musicians ever in American history, didn't play a single instrument. Right. And then you have the disc jockeys, like you have the DJs who just drive popular taste, and you're one of those figures. You're maybe the figure in that respect. So. If you are, this may be impossible for you to do, but I'm going to push you. If you had to make the Mount Rushmore of Jewish musicians or bands or whatever it is, who are like the top four, who goes on the Mount Rushmore of Jewish music in your career?
Well, to be fair, this is a question I normally wouldn't answer because I don't think it's fair for me to be put in that position. But to be fair, how could you not include Mordechai and David and Avram Fried? Only because between their longevity and their popularity and their menschlichkeit, they've been there from day one.
At a certain point, you're LeBron playing at a very high level for 20 years.
Correct. So LeBron's going to be on Mount Rushmore. That's the obvious one. I'm trying to think who I would put in the third and fourth positions. Yeah. I personally would have to put Kalbach because of his influence. And a fourth that fits into that, the truth is, I'd have to put A.B. Rottenberg there.
Wow.
Because
I love that
and it's not just the performances. He's had such a ripple effect on so much of the industry. People write a certain way because of him. People perform a certain way because of him. People take seriously what they're saying through music because of him.
It's a great pick.
And that's, so he deserves to be there. And thank God there's only 4. And when it comes to the DJs, look, again, I think I was very lucky that I was in a certain era. You know, America was very, very focused on Wolfman Jack and Cousin Brucey and a million other really solid music DJs who helped promote, you know, secular music throughout the country. And I think that I was at the right place at the right time. For this, in the 1960s and 70s, I don't think you could have convinced a Jewish high school student to spend any time listening to Jewish music. How do I know? Because I was one of them. When the 1980s and 90s roll around, the legendary, I'm sure you've heard of her, Mrs. Newman of blessed memory from Beruria, is saying something to me that you made it cool for Jewish teenagers to listen to Jewish music. Now, first of all, if that's true, then that's got to be worth some points up there.
Anyone who grew up when I grew up, that was JM and the AM was our avenue into it.
So, and it made it very comfortable in carpools during an era when to listen to news reports about, you know, different things was very sensitive sometimes, to say the least. I mean, there are certain scandals we can, you know, including the presidency, you know, in the 1990s. So that was very important. And what was I going to say? So, right, so Mrs. Newman made that statement, and the people, and they found.
I mean, you made it cool to listen to Jewish music, like
right.
You made it.
I think that it was it was just the right time for it. Oh, but that's what I wanted to say. In my own home, and I'm sure that till today this still goes on. In my own home, I always used to say that the musical atmosphere is different Monday through Wednesday than Thursday and Friday. Monday through Wednesday, my kids could have a regular secular radio station on, and you know, and be up on all the women and men that I am not familiar with, you know, in terms of music. Thursday and Friday,
you don't have an opinion on the Kendrick versus Drake beef? Okay.
No, I would sound like a fool if I commented on that. But Thursday and Friday, all of a sudden, if you paid careful attention to my living room and listened to what's going on in their bedrooms, Eitan Katz,
amazing,
Shlomo Katz, Kalbach, and God forbid, in our home, if an hour before Shabbos someone dared to turn off Eitan Katz till the last minute, that's the chiyuv. The chiyuv is till the last minute. You have to listen to Erev Shabbos music until candlelighting time. And that was, to me, that was just, I don't know. Again, you know, you know where my career started, and you know where we're sitting. So the blending of many worlds is really important to someone like me. That to me is just incredible. That the soundtrack of life changes depending on the, you know, on the upcoming religious days.
I'll tell you why, by the way, A.B. Rotenberg's such a great pick, because I remember even just listening to like the Journey's albums, he's laying out like a hashkafa, and I think the closest thing anyone has ever articulated to my hashkafa is the Journey's albums. Like,
someone once said to me, you know, what do you think of this, of these English Jewish ballads? Or I asked them, and their answer was, it's A.B. Rotenberg light. A.B. Rotenberg's light.
I love it.
Meaning, no one's ever going to be A.B. It's sort of like what I always say, no one's ever going to be Kalbach, but if anybody was, A.B.'s got 5% of it. Like, he's the only one that's got a, you know, part of it. And his messaging through these songs, you know, even the simple songs, you know, he'll argue with you about Journeys 3, you know, about whether there's actually good, you know, if the messages are really done well in those songs or not. You know, we've had discussions about it. But what he's able to do through those songs is absolutely remarkable.
I mean, it's amazing to think like he has so much of it is ahead of its time. He has the influences of Hasidus. Like he's anticipating Nia Hasidus by decades. So you have the Rebbe from Lublin. You have all of the Hasidic storytelling. You have Zionism, right? But and you have like a sort of like a commonsensical religious Zionism. You have Yerushalayim. You have what you're looking for is right there at your door.
Right.
You know, you have Kirov stuff in it. You have a sensibility. You have appreciation for sports. Like you have the kind of the just great, again, common sense morality. He also baseball. Joe DiMaggio's car, the Ninth Man.
He also took on topics that in those days. Remember, the first Journeys is 1984. Yeah. Right. In those days, no one's talking about the Shidduch crisis. He makes a song about it. In those days, no one's talking about those who travel to India to try to find themselves.
That's a great point.
He writes and sings
in that song,
and it's a very powerful song.
Yes.
So you know, he's definitely ahead of his time. I'd also say he's a product of a certain era. I don't know if somebody, you know, who grows up today,
just like normal from
can grasp the things that he's talking about.
So true.
Somebody who, he's 60s and 70s. That's where he's, being developed. And I think it's only someone from that era. Again, I think most people would be so afraid and hesitant to write "There's No Place Like Home," the song about traveling to find oneself. They'd be so, they'd worry about what people will say and how it's going to be taken, how it will be accepted, not accepted.
He even has,
and I don't know if it's important today. He demonstrated that it's
he even
important.
has an astonishing ecumenicism. Like the Atheist Convention, he takes seriously not just the Jewish guy, but the Muslim guy and the Christian guy. Like he's taking them seriously. It's like wild stuff.
I'm looking at ZK because we have a non-Jewish friend whose favorite song was the Atheist Convention. And it's such an important. That's a song that anybody of any background could listen to. And chop,
And you have non-Jewish listenership. Like we'll get to that in a little bit.
Yeah.
I want to stay on Jewish music for just a little bit. One thing that really strikes me as a core interest of yours is like when you think about Jewish music. So for several decades, it is there is an Israeli tradition, but it's of music. But But it's very like either chalutzim folk songs or people who spent some time in Israel but they're Americans, and everybody is inevitably like even people who are based in Israel and see themselves as Israeli. But you mentioned Eitan Katz, Shlomo Katz. They're very influenced by Shlomo Carlebach. At a certain point, and I can't exactly pinpoint when, but at some time in the last couple of years, it felt like, and it feels like, in a wonderful way, there's kind of been a shift in the center of gravity towards Israel, where now the major acts who are doing wonderful things is Yishai Ribo, Akiva, even Omer Adam, is bringing a whole different tradition. And so, how have you experienced that shift?
Well, first of all the people you just mentioned would never have been on my show 5-10 years ago.
Right.
They would have been almost undiscoverable. Certainly,
Hanan Ben Ari.
Right, I would never have understood the hype with which they're being accepted in Israel. But I think this all comes down to, talk about business school, I think it comes down to a really practical thing. And that is that today, when someone finishes recording a song in Israel, 10 minutes later, it is in everybody's phone around the world.
That's true.
Now, I don't mean everybody, meaning they're not trying to sell it and distribute it to the proper streaming channels, but I know in my case, because of my position, our music department, I can walk in tomorrow morning and there'll be 10 new downloads, that have come from Israel. And they've always understood the importance of the American market. But they never knew how to reach it. I got to hire a distributor, a publicist, someone who knows how to call this guy Nachum Segal. Like nobody understood them. Today, it's like 10 minutes later, the entire distribution is done. So I think that practical element's important. And look, the other thing is, and this was predicted by my late friend Meir Weingarten, who I write about in the book years ago, and that is that the Yishai Ribo effect, the fact that there would be somebody who, and again, happens to be from Israel, who's able to reach frum and non-frum people with the same music is mind-boggling.
It's wild.
Now, he predicted it. I thought he was a little bit too all in on it, but he ended up being completely right. And now, of course, the other names you mentioned are the same thing. I mean, the Madison Square Garden thing, I could sit here till tomorrow analyzing why it did what it did in terms of selling out with Yishai Ribo and whether that's an aberration or not. We could do that at the Shalom Shiz table next time I see you. But
the most important performances are on Shabbos.
Say that again. That's where the real show is. But I think that the incredible bridge that they have been able to create between frum and non-frum, and Israel and diaspora, and whatever other elements you want to toss into it, has been a real game changer in Jewish music.
It's amazing because I remember growing up, my mom used to laugh. My mom's from Cleveland. And she used to say, remember when Yehuda exclamation point was huge? So she's like, I knew the Chick Boys. They were B'nai Akiva Moshavah kids. All of a sudden they're singing, oh, yeah. Now it's the opposite. You have like Mordechai Shapiro, who all of a sudden has an Israeli accent, because the influence of a lot of this is.
And it's not just Mordechai Shapiro, it's Yaakov Shweki and many others. It is unbelievable. But this is also, it's so funny. I think about some of the different. What was one of the biggest battles I always fought early on in my career? There were certain issues that were Kol Isha is always an issue, and Zionism is always an issue. There's always issues. Now, 40 years later, people know exactly who I am, say make less of these issues. whenever I would play a song in the 1980s with Shem Hashem, the phones blew up. Wow. How dare you? Today, I played the entire Az Yashir on Friday, which had Shem Hashem and multiple. No one saying a word. Because people are used to the fact that these artists, they literally are using Shem Hashem in so many songs, and people are used to it, plus the Sephardic element that we're never the ones to complain about it. They always felt it was fine. The Ashkenazim were like, the Briskers couldn't handle it, So, I'm trying to remember what you asked me.
Well, it's just like there's this kind of like,
the Israeli...
This directional influence that used to go from there to here, and now it seems to go
And I'll tell you something, I always made a big deal, and it's one of the things I wrote about in the book, that I felt before October 7th, I was really on the bandwagon since 2008, since that economic downturn. I was always on the bandwagon that now, instead of a diaspora jury depending on Israel, instead of Israel depending on diaspora jury is now going to depend on Israel. I was so sad that I was so wrong after October 7th. That's just not the case. And it's not a bad thing, it's just a sad thing. That the reality is that we had an obligation to have to do God knows how many things in order to help prop up our brothers and sisters in Israel post-October 7th. But this influence, the musical one, that didn't change. That's still now, as you say, coming more directly from there to here than from here overseas.
I want, just because you mentioned the user feedback that you get, the structure of the book, which I loved, is that it really is built around user feedback that you get. And one of the best recurring bits in the book is you'll have an email where someone writes you this really passionate, verging on angry email about how what you're doing is a disgrace. And then the next email is from someone who's like, keep doing it, I love it, it's made my day, you changed my life, I'm from because of this thing. And how has your interaction with your listeners and your audience, shaped how you are as a radio personality, and how do you understand the different pockets and segments of your radio audience, and how you balance them?
There's a chapter, how would you like your show?
Yeah.
And it's everybody thinks that it's their show to mold however they want. Look, I used to have a folder in the 1980s called Hate Mail. That was the folder, right? We got real letters, and by the way, none of those are in the book. Because if you think some of these are bad, those are really, really bad. So I honestly think it was the volume that was able to keep me sane. In other words, I took every letter and interaction and feedback very seriously and to heart. And you know how it is, you take things a lot less seriously at 35 than at 25. I was doing this in my 20s and saying to myself, oh my God, am I as bad as this listener thinks I am? But I think the volume, we had a lot of really positive stuff going on. We had the fundraising marathon, which elicited a lot of positive comments. So that was very, very helpful in getting through all that. Listener interaction, it's funny. A lot of times I'll speak to somebody who's really upset about something, and then when you speak to them, you see they're not that, they're not upset. They have a point of view they wanted to get across. And, 99% of the other stuff they don't, they enjoy. Ed Koch used to say that if you agree with 90% of what I say, you're normal. If you agree with 100%, you're insane. So, I think that's sort of the same thing. Now, the immediate response and feedback, app comments, texts, emails, it's a completely different ballgame. I mean, I had an episode, oh gosh, it must be, were we married yet? I don't remember. Where I made a derogatory comment about how we are over-medicating our children in regard to someone asking if Ritalin was kosher with Pesach. Do you remember?
Yeah, we were married.
So, everyone went crazy. I mean, everyone went crazy. Not only did I have to go on the next day with a disclaimer, but I literally had to speak to, 30, 35 listeners that were, completely affected by what I said, talk about influence. And then on top of that, we had to do an interview the following week explaining, why so many children and adults, need medication, this and that, et cetera, et cetera. So, you never know. I once had a situation where the person doing our Yeshiva League sports report, now you know how serious this could be, Yeshiva League sports, made the following statement. They ran up the score against the other team. I was required, in order to get back in good graces of this yeshiva, very powerful yeshiva in the Yeshiva League, I was required to get on the air the next day and explain that we didn't mean run up the score. We were trying to tell everybody that they're so powerful a team that they, dominated and routed them. So,
I said jokingly to a friend of mine, I was like, the worst thing that ever happened to Yeshiva League sports is Ryan Terrell. Why? Because it used to be when our kids would be like, we have to have lessons and we have to play every single day and we have to be like, what are you going to do? Make it to the NBA?
Oh, is that funny?
Now, Terrell is here and we're like, well, I don't know.
That's hilarious.
Jacob Steinmetz, same thing. So
that's right.
So I want to transition. One thing that's fascinating about your book is that you can think of JM in the AM, and actually this is I think implicit in the transition from JM being Jewish music to being Jewish moments is, originally, and this is how your career starts, you're a disc jockey, playing music, and you're talking about stuff around it, but you're a musical figure.
Right.
What is amazing as you dig back into the archives of the show is you become the voice for a community, and certainly to a community, that's narrating basically several decades worth, and continuing to narrate several decades worth of Jewish history and world history. And one of the things I found most interesting was, of course you expect Nachum Segal to have something to say about major events in the Jewish world or major events in Israel, but what was so amazing was to see how many incredible events in American national history or in New York history you were an essential voice on, whether it was the World Trade Center attacks, but one that stuck out to me was you play a role in deciding the Giuliani-Dinkins election.
Yeah, that was no question about it.
So what was that like, that particular election, and how did that help you think about the role you play, whether you like it or not, in the political realm?
When David Hinckley of the Daily News asked me, what's it like being, going through this whole process? I said, I don't know. I have a microphone. It seems everybody wants it. It's quite a feeling. Everyone's fighting over my mic.
You're like the guy in the shtetl who had the Sefer Torah. It's like, well, you want a minion.
Very good. Very good. So, yeah, that was, that particular episode was just insane. First of all, it's a campaign, so it lasts for weeks. It's not like it's, an episode, an incident, and a few days later it's gone. This is just building up, and everyone's on one side from the Jewish representation of their campaign going, how dare you? How dare you put on the... And everyone on the other side is, how dare you? Hey, I don't know what you want, guys. I'm just,
You're getting the same treatment as Seinfeld. Like, they have to record 2 different episodes, one with Giuliani, one with Dinkins at the end of the
Correct.
episode. Right?
Very good. So, that was unique, and that was really cool, obviously. And what was interesting about it, and this is what you're pointing out, is the Jewish community swung the election.
Yeah.
Now, Giuliani's guys were really angry when we would say that to him after the election, because then they felt like they owed us, and they felt like, they got to be there for the community.
It's 50,000 votes.
But it's a lot of votes, and it was a really contentious race in a lot of very interesting Jewish neighborhoods, not just Brooklyn, everywhere in the city. And, there were events everywhere. There were town halls, some of which I hosted. There were, I remember during one of the campaigns, visits to Staten Island, to synagogues, and visits to Brooklyn and Queens. Like, this was always a very big, a very big constituency, and it still is, obviously, a very influential one. I was the other day, as an aside, just because it's funny in my opinion, I happened to speak to Anthony Weiner. And I really do feel bad for what has happened to him, because I felt he was one of the best guys in the world of government. Not everybody agrees with me, I get it. But I'm still in touch with him, and he's running now for city council, and frankly, I wish him the best of luck. And all right, anyway. So I said to him, one of the best stories happened with you. He says, what are you talking about? I said, I was sitting at a dinner at the Young Israel of... Not the Young Israel, of Congregation Eitz Chaim in Queens. I'm sitting at the dinner at Congregation Eitz Chaim in Queens, and I'm minding my own business, and they're making speeches. And he, because he's the congressman in that district, walks in. He sees me, so he comes over to the table. As the speeches are going on, he comes over to the table, and he looks at me, and he goes, tell me, what is this, a one-state crowd, a two-state crowd? I reminded him about that. I said, I prepared you for that speech. I told you exactly what you needed to say. So, yeah, there's been a lot of a lot of crossover into the world of politics, that's for sure.
But what's amazing is, I think the temptation of a lesser person in your seat would have been to both sides everything. And there are times where you get you.
But I think Giuliani thinks it was both sides everything.
So it was, but it was,
right.
And you actually go out of your way to kind of educate your audience. So like, I just want you to know what's happening. So you're bringing on people from both sides, and you describe in the book, how you do that on several occasions. What was fascinating about Dinkins Giuliani though is that you don't hide in the book that there were real problems under Dinkins for the Jewish community, specifically for the Jewish community, that needed to be addressed.
Right.
And one thing I've loved about your show over the years is that you want to educate your audience, but you also don't hide your opinions when it's important. So you're not shy about your Zionism. You're not shy about particularly where you fit on the spectrum of Zionism. You're not, you know what I mean? Like you
know what's
you have
funny?
a perspective.
2024 might prove your point.
Yeah.
Because in 1988, we actually had, I don't know how many shows about now who would it have been? It would have been Bush versus, help me out folks.
Gore.
Bush, was it Bush Gore, 88?
First Bush you're talking about,
Yeah.
88.
Was Bush Gore?
It was Bush.
No.
No, it wasn't Bush Gore.
I can't believe I don't remember this. This is unbelievable. I don't remember this. Anyway,
Yeah.
Bush Dukakis? Bush Dukakis. It was Bush Dukakis. We had so many shows with people coming on from the community about both candidates. In 2024, do you think I could have done one show about other candidates?
Yeah. I'm with
It
you.
is a different world in the
Yeah.
Jewish world, and I think that might prove the point, that in those days it was much easier or important to do it, and now I don't know if it's even worthwhile.
I remember my grandfather, Olav Shalom, once telling me that the two favorite people he ever met in his career, because he given his position and his personality, he met so many wonderful people. The two people that I met in my life I was most excited to meet were the two people that the only two people I've ever met, he said, who I believe loved every single Jewish person, no matter who they were. The Lubavitcher Rebbe and Menachem Begin.
Wow.
You have had a career like that where you've not just been in the room at a Hanukkah dinner, but you've actually really spent serious time meeting with and speaking with some of the most important people who've shaped human history and Jewish history, from presidents to prime ministers to generals. You have an amazing picture with Mata Gur in the book. What was the best, or one of or some of the most impactful people that you met who made a rosham on you?
Among those who are no longer with us, do you know who I would put in that category? Joseph Gruss.
Wow.
Joseph Gruss, who I had the opportunity to spend 2 long sessions with. I was 20 years old. And he heard me speak somewhere as a 20-year-old and thought I was some superstar. I got to give the guy credit. And we got together on 2 occasions in his office just to discuss. He wanted to discuss my future. We discussed Jewish education. Talk about love. He put his money where his mouth is. Wow. He loved Jewish youth, Jewish education, and Jewish future. Maybe not exactly the way we portray the Lubavitcher Rebbe, but among those who are living, and I'm sure so many people watching this would agree with me, Rabbi Grossman.
Wow.
One of my sons told me the other day, we were together in Migdal Emek, I think it was 2010, 2011, it was their 7th grade trip to Israel. And I think you were there, ZK. And we spent the day with him. What an experience. The love everyone has for him, the love he has for everybody else. When I see him, and which is every 5 years, he treats me as if he's been waiting 6 months in that very spot till I got there. That's how, which is unbelievable to be made to feel that way. So those are 2 of the names that come to mind. I'm sure there's so many others.
Do you ever have any moment on air that was just totally unexpected?
I always say, any question that starts with, did it ever, or did you ever? And after 40 years, the answer is yes. Do you know that I was doing an interview with an author, I think it was Rabbi Sutton, about 6 months ago, and as I'm doing the interview over the phone, a bird flies into my studio. And I turn to a friend of mine in the building, and I say, do you know that I think this is a first. I don't think this has ever happened before. Could you imagine? I had to continue the interview while at the same time trying to figure out how to get this thing out. It was so crazy, so surreal. But yeah, that's one of the great things about it.
You may as well have just interviewed the bird.
This is one of the great things about about what I do, that you never know what's going to happen next.
That's amazing.
And that's the reality, and that's both for good and for bad. When the show is ending and we hear bad news, God forbid a terrorist attack in Israel. I have a general manager who did a show every Wednesday morning after me, and so 9/11 was on a Tuesday. So in those days, in 2001, I'm sure you remember, every other day a bus was blowing up in Israel. Unfortunately, it was the height of one of the intifadas. So this is Ken. He walks into the studio at about 5 minutes to 9, it's about to end, and he says, "Tell me how to do one of these disaster shows. You do them all the time." so you never know what's going to happen, and you hope it's good news and not bad. But again, it's one of the things that just are so exciting about it. Literally, when I open the mic at 6 a.m., I don't know what's going to happen during that show.
My daughter right now has an amazing teacher. Shouts to Mrs. Rosenberg. She's her family's all from the West Side, very close with my family. And so, she, had a real relationship with my grandfather, blessed memory. And so on the anniversary this year of the JFK assassination, she brought in and read parts of his drasha on the JFK assassination. And my daughter's there, and she, has her stand up. It was very cute. So and so she came home. That was an amazing way for us to talk about a hashkafic perspective on assassination of JFK. What does it mean for a world leader to be killed? Your show spans so many massively important events and also crucial events in the lives of individuals. Was there a moment on air where you ever just felt the weight of the moment, the gravity of the situation?
The gravity of the situation on the air. That's a good question. I'd have to think about that.
9/11 might be a...
9/11 was not really on the air. 9/11, I am called right before the show ends by a staff member. A plane just hit the World Trade Center. I said, no wonder, because we were right across the river from the World Trade Center. I said, no wonder there's 1 million people in our parking lot, because they're all looking toward New York. And then the drama for me, 9/11, was I didn't get home till Thursday. Meaning I stayed in Jersey because they threatened if you try to get through the Holland Tunnel or whatever, even if you prove you live in Manhattan, you're not going to get back, the whole thing. So I did the show Wednesday morning and then Thursday morning and then made my way back to Manhattan. So that, for me, that drama was more of the, of what everybody was going through, just in terms of trying to get their life back to normal. And to try to get somewhere because you just couldn't move anywhere at that time. The weight on the air, I have to say, by the way, that I don't know how well I portray this in the book, but I think my father's visit on the last day of his life actually was a weight on the air. Because when my father informed us on Sunday, this was a Wednesday that he went missing, when he informed us on Sunday that he was going to come to the radio station to pay tribute on the 25th anniversary, remember he was 91 years old, I was trying to convince him not to do it. I said, we don't even have a chair in the radio station that you'll be comfortable in. Somebody like about a 91-year-old, so you'll at least be somewhat comfortable. But he refused to listen and wanted to make sure to come, which he did. And that, I think the weight of that day started to weigh on me. I wanted to make sure not to mention his name on the air.
By the way, the best part of the story is you have your producer at the time, maybe it was Mayor
Matas Wanges.
You have him introduce him, so you
Correct.
don't say his name.
So I wouldn't have to say his name publicly.
Really amazing.
And I wore a tie, which I don't know. I think I mentioned it on that show that it was the first time I'd ever worn a tie in studio. That's on the road. And there was another thing I forgot what it was that we had arranged for him. But anyway, so that the weight of that was, and then of course the whole, he came to the radio station to pay tribute to me. He ends up. And he was, in fact, an effective driver at 91 years old. We didn't expect the fact there would be a massive downpour and he would take a detour, on a road that had no barrier. But and I forgot what I was going to say.
It was
But but then people, of course, as you can imagine, Shiva Shloshim at any point where this must be like such a burden for you. He comes to pay tribute, to say some kind words about you, and then literally drives off to his death. Like how can you wrap your head around it? And I will tell you that as much as I understand that comment, I never felt that way. It was like I don't know if I felt it was meant to be or felt that the whole experience was so beautiful until the disaster. I don't know, but it was, even till today, it's not 2025, this was 2008. Even till today, it's like, I can't grasp it, but I can wrap my head around it. You know what I mean? Like, that part of it doesn't really bother me, but parts of it are difficult to grasp.
Going back, I may have mentioned this to you before, but going back through the, JMAM archives, there's so many moments that stick out to you, but one that really caught my ear it's an interview, I believe in 2004. It's Joey Bodner in Gaza City.
Oh, wow.
In a hotel.
Right.
And he's talking to you about how beautiful
with a group of people, I assume.
The group of people, how beautiful it is, how gorgeous it is, and the soldiers are here, and here are the yeshiva and seminary kids, and when I heard that, it struck me. Obviously, especially for the last year and a half, but certainly since '05, Gaza has kind of been synonymous with, a haven for terrorists and a place. And it struck me, both in Tanakh, where that area is, the Plishtim settle there for a reason. It's one of the most beautiful places on earth. But all the way down to '04, Joey Bodner is describing it like it's paradise.
And anybody who lived there said it was paradise.
Yeah. How have you experienced and understood, particularly from your seat as someone who has to explain it and narrate it to a wider community and listening audience, how have you understood the shifts in Israeli history in the last, several decades?
Well, you know what they call it in Israel, concepcia.
Yes.
Where everyone is not everyone, where many people are convinced that if there's an effort to make peace and to live in peace, that it actually can happen. So how have I understood it? I'll tell you. I don't think it's a way of understanding and then transmitting that understanding. I think it's a bit different. I have tried to normalize what many people have thought are abnormal activities for Jews. So Joey Bodner's on the air, likely with a group from B'nai Yeshurun and Teaneck, I assume.
Yeah.
Joey Bodner's on the air 20 years ago from there, so I can emphasize to people that yes, a regular, normal Teaneck Jew, not the settler look, and not the, can actually go and visit Gaza and make a statement and be there for the Jewish people, etc. Same with Judea and Samaria. You can ask ZK, who's our great videographer today. We took a trip to Judea and Samaria.
Shouts to ZK.
You got it. In 2001, that was challenging, to say the least. But people are listening 6,000 miles away thinking, wow, Nachum Segal's in Karnei Shomron, and Nachum Segal's in Kidumin, and Nachum Segal is in Mitzpeh Yericho. So, and then of course the biggest example of this, and I hope this makes the point, this answers your question, is that we normalized travel to Hebron. Nobody, and I mean nobody, would ever think of spending a Shabbos in Hebron before JM and the A. Nobody.
That's a great point.
And we went ahead, and on every...
Now you're a loser if you don't go.
Correct. Every opportunity, weekday, tour, any excuse, go David Slichas, any opportunity, we are convincing people that they should be among those who are going. And of course, Shabbat Hebron, I can't take full credit for it. There are 10,000 Israelis who are already doing it. But Shabbat Hebron, from our standpoint, making it a really hip, cool, and interesting thing to do, to spend Shabbos Chayesar in Hebron, is amazing. Final point. I get to Hebron on one of those Shabbatot, and a young lady walks up to me and says, "I'm here because of you." And I said, "That's very nice. What do you mean?" She said, "Well, my parents were convinced that it's completely unsafe for me to come here for Shabbos. Then they heard you were coming, they said, oh, fine, no problem at all." Trust me, I don't know why she thought I'd be the one protecting her. But this is the impression that people get when they hear it on the air. So yeah, that's, look, in general, the Zionist piece, The future of the Jewish people is in the state of Israel. It's something I've always believed. I continue to preach it. I shudder when I think of how many rabbinic leaders don't use the opportunity to state it. It bothers me tremendously. And I'm talking about from the Hasidic world to the most modern world. It bothers me tremendously that they in their positions don't take the opportunity at least once a year. Like I always say, on Shabbos HaGadol, can we not talk about the shear of Haroses, and instead talk about that this is the holiday that's the beginning of Jewish nationalism? That the end of this holiday is us actually getting to Israel? Can we please do that? So that's frustrating to me. So I try my best from this bully pulpit to emphasize just how important Israel is, and to encourage people to travel to Israel, even now, with prices the way they are and everything else. I'm not demanding that people follow through. You can't make it, that's fine, but have a plan. Make sure that you're thinking in your head, here's the next reasonable time that I can be there and I can enjoy time there.
One of the most interesting chapters in the book that I was surprised by, and even though I guess logically you must have known it was true, you have a whole chapter on non-Jewish listeners.
Right.
How do you explain that phenomenon? I mean, listen, I suppose, one of the real advantages of the era we currently live in is that niche is back. I will listen to a podcast on the top 50 Indian classical music songs of all time. I have no hook into this world. It's just super fascinating.
I can never be in a car with you.
Yeah. this is how I keep carpools out. But one of the real media trends of the 2020s has been just going all in on niche audiences and saying, I want to listen to an obsessive talk about the thing he or she are obsessed with. But, when you were coming of age in the radio industry, this was the era of mass appeal. Everyone had grown up on the Brady Bunch and Gilligan's Island and Silver Spoon, so how do you understand and explain having a listenership outside of the niche audience that you're targeting?
It's funny because I have actual emails to prove it, and other anecdotal...
And some of them in the book, they're amazing.
Right, and other anecdotal episodes where people just want to be part of family and community. And when they listened to the show, they felt like they were part of something. I always say that, among the non-Orthodox, the Friday morning JM was their Shabbos. That was it's time to say good Shabbos, candle lighting time, Hira Bayudin. The next day they'd be golfing, but this was their Shabbos experience, and I was responsible for doing that for them. And I'll never forget a non-religious staff member at WFMU, on Erev Tisha B'Av. It was a weekday, Erev Tisha B'Av. And Rabbi Goldwasser was, I delayed putting Rabbi Goldwasser's Dvar Torah on. I was so frustrated at myself that I had not gotten to it. It was supposed to be 7:30. I didn't do it until 7:40, and I'm so frustrated. In walks Meredith, this staff member, and says to me, I was just listening to the last couple minutes in the car. I didn't realize tomorrow's Tisha B'Av. I have to make sure to have break fast with my family. I said, what? You actually know what Tisha B'Av is? It's the funniest things. I don't know to what degree she fasted or didn't, but just, you never know who's listening and what they're going to gain from it and how much it's going to impact them. And even today, by the way, I came across emails recently. During the digital era, where still non-Orthodox or non-Jewish people are listening to the show, which is just amazing. A lot of people like good radio.
Yeah.
Seriously, a lot of people like good. I do a show in Israel every day for an hour. So I met a guy named Rabbi Kamenetsky, a Hasidic man in Kiryat Sefer. He says, I listen to you every day. I said, Rabbi Kamenetsky, first of all, you don't know English. And secondly, you're a Hasidic. He says, yeah, I just love hearing your voice. I said, okay, there you go. So people just like good radio. So
golden throat like Rod Stewart, that's great.
There you go.
So speaking of good radio, I want to close it out with just looking forward. So we're in an era now where the entire game has changed, right? So in a sense, radio is back, but in new forms, right? So you have podcasts, now you have live podcasts that are huge.
Video stuff.
Right. Most podcasts now are listened to on YouTube, are actually watched on YouTube now. You have, in the music world, you have streaming, you have Spotify, you have iTunes, you have Apple Music, right? So what does this new era look like for someone who came of age, and who started broadcasting in 84?
Yeah, it's just a matter of trying to get people's attention. In other words, if I can get your attention, especially if you're in my niche, potential audience, I'm gonna get you.
Yeah.
You know, if I'm going to get your attention, I guarantee you that once a week, at the minimum, you're going to listen to what I'm doing on my network. That
So what are you excited for in this era? Because it feels there's so many opportunities. Right? Like you can reach people in so many different ways.
I think that, I mean, again, when it comes to me and my excitement, it's all about Israel. And eventually, you know, the goal is to spend a good part of the year in Israel and broadcast from there and bring whatever's happening in Israel to the diaspora, you know, even more so than we're doing now. And I think that that's really one of the only major pieces that's been missing from my recent shows is the personalities that are making a difference in Israel, especially ones that speak English. I started doing it a little bit. Tzvi Cheskel's been on my show. Like, you know, I've started doing it a little. Ariel Kahana's been on my show. So I'm sort of, you know, getting there. But if I'm in Israel in the next year or two on a more permanent basis, then I would hope that that would be, you know, just like I've introduced music from Israel to an American audience, I hope to introduce more Israeli personalities to the American audience.
That's amazing. The book is 1.8 million minutes and counting, celebrating and contemplating my first 40 years in Jewish broadcasting by Nachum Segal. This has been an absolute privilege.
Thank you, Ari. Rabbi Dr. Ari Lev.
That was so fun.